Development Design Review Panel. Please be advised as part of the start of the meeting that all electronic devices will be switched off. We have 3 items on the agenda today on these developments. Shannon, are there any changes to the agenda? Any declarations of interest?
Number 3
Not much.
on Main Street, Willie's person.
Okay, Shannon, please take note of that, and when the item comes up, there will just for addressing the issue. Okay, 310 Francis Avenue. First item on the agenda today is a mixed-use development located at 310 Francis Avenue. The planner in the file is Melanie Schneider. Good afternoon, Melanie. And we're ready for your presentation. The 9-minute mark. I will just give you a nod to close up in 10 minutes.
Okay, perfect, thank you. So as I said, this application is at 310 Variances Avenue in Stoney Creek. It is a site plan control application, DA 19020. The proposal is for a set of 3 towers at the intersection of North Service Road and Green Road. The towers are proposed to be 48, 54, and 59 stories in height each, all to be shared within one central podium. The podium itself is 4 stories with that will accompany or contain parking spaces, 400 square meters of commercial space, as well as 8 ground-related dwellings. So they will be accessed from Green Road, and I'll show you in a moment. There will also be 2 underground levels of parking as well. There's going to be a rooftop amenity over that podium. The floor plates for each of the towers is 952 square meters each, total of 1,836 dwelling units, and a total of 2,387 parking spaces and 22 commercial parking spaces. As I said, the lands are at the intersection of North Service Road, which is along here, Green Road up here, and then the municipal address of Francis Street is this road here. The land, as you can see, are also just north of the QEW and are approximately 2 hectares in size. These photos just give some context for the area. So the subject lands are shown, if I can find, there we go. These are the subject lands here. This is approximately an 18-story apartment building. And then over here are 2-story townhouse dwellings. There's some 3 stories as well further back. This photo is the existing commercial plaza at 461 Green Road, which is this property right here. This plaza is actually under a development application itself. The intent of that application is to take out the commercial and put in a 14-story apartment building as well. This property, or this photo, just shows the site looking towards North Service Road, so you can see the sales trailer for the developments further east and north of this property. These photos just show some of the existing lower typology of dwellings in the area. So these are the townhouse dwellings that I mentioned before, right across the street from the subject lands. And then these are street townhouses along Green Road, just north of the commercial block. This site plan just gives us a better idea of the proposed development. So we have the 3 towers, the amenity space in this area here. Green Road's right here, Francis Avenue here. The access to the site is all going to be along Francis Avenue, and those 8 ground-related units right here with the 400 square meters commercial right at the intersection of Francis and Green Road. These plans show the elevations for the development. So we have the 4-story podium here and the towers. This is from the cul-de-sac end of Francis Avenue. This is from North Service Road, so you can see that this facade does have some articulation. And then the west elevation from Green Road with the commercial block right here, and then the ground-related dwelling units right here. For policy environment, the lands are designated neighborhoods within Schedule E1 of the Urban Hamilton Official Plan. There is no secondary plan for this area. For the policy environment, we do have urban design policies which speak to respecting character, promoting quality design, pedestrian-oriented developments, minimizing shadowing, appropriate building massing for the area, and transition in scale. For the neighborhood's designation, we do encourage a range of housing units, including housing with supports, permitting high-density development along minor arterial roads in periphery of neighborhoods, and then providing a transition of low-density typologies to high-density. This shows some of the zoning that applies to the area. So this property is a mixed-use commercial zone with site-specific provisions. I'll get to that in a moment. Across the street, we do have the commercial plaza, which is community commercial zone. We have multiple residential RM5 for these two blocks here, and then a combination of multiple residential 3 here. These are some of the permissions from zoning for the neighborhood. So the mixed-use commercial zone that applies to this property has no maximum height requirement and a minimum density of 585 dwelling units. The RM5 zone, which applies to the existing 18 and 19 story apartment buildings, also have no maximum height requirements, but a maximum density of 150 units per hectare. The RM3 zone, which applies to the townhouse dwelling right across the street on Variances, has no maximum height for townhouse dwellings, but has a minimum density of 188 units. The RM2 zone, which is the street towns on Green Road, have a maximum height of 11 meters and only permit 8 dwelling units per block. And then the C3 zone, which is in our City of Hamilton bylaw 05200, does permit mixed-use development to a maximum height of 14 meters. So here I have some anticipated minor variances that we've identified so far. These minor variances are not final. We may determine that some are not appropriate, or that further review determines that other ones are required, but these are just here for your information as well. And the specific discussion question that planning staff has posed to you: what is the relationship of the proposal with the height in terms of massing scale of nearby residential buildings? Does the proposal complement and animate existing surrounding buildings through design and placement, as well as through placement of pedestrian amenities? And does the proposal integrate conveniently located public transit and cycling infrastructure with existing and new development? And that's all I have today. Thank you.
Okay, could I ask you just to go back a couple of slides?
Yeah, for sure.
So it was quick. Just for the benefit of myself and some others, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Just go forward again, just to the zoning map. Okay. So could you just repeat with me, this RM5 allows no maximum height?
Yep. So this MUC-4
Yes.
and the RM5
Yes.
and this chunk right here
Uh-huh.
all have no maximum height requirements. And then this RM2 right here permits a maximum height of 11 meters, and the C3 right here permits a maximum height of 14 meters.
I have one other quick question to you. Are there any plans for the city with a park block immediately to the east?
It's going to remain open space. I believe, I don't have as much history on that block, but I believe through the Green Milling Shores subdivision, that had to remain untouched. Yes, yes.
And that existing apartment building is located where?
The existing apartment building is right
Right there.
here, and
Yes.
then there's another one just north.
And that's at 18.
Yes.
Can you show us the variances again?
Yeah.
If required?
Right here. So we do have variances to permit the ground-related units on the ground floor, because right now the bylaw only permits commercial on the ground floor. Minimum rear yard setback of 2.5 meters, whereas 3 meters is currently required. A minimum landscape open space of 20% instead of 50%. I do want to emphasize that variance is somewhat technical, because there is a provision in the bylaw which requires no maximum lot coverage. So that policy just doesn't jive with that parent requirement. To consider rooftop amenity space as landscape open space, again, that does create a technical variance. The minimum parking spaces, so right now the proposal is a total of 2,409. The bylaw requires 2,769 spaces. And then the last two variances are to recognize landscape strips, even though there are site-specific requirements which do not require any setback. So again, it's a policy that just doesn't jive with the site-specific.
Thank you. Okay, we're now ready for the applicant to present a proposal. Again, for 9 minute mark, this is we need to
That's what it is. The second will make sure. Okay, ready when you are. Good afternoon, my name is Jeff Bacon. I'm co-owner of the developer New Horizon Development Group. And I'd like to introduce you to our team who is putting this group, this presentation together and this whole development together eventually. Starting with Mike Foley, our in-house project manager planner. From the GSP group, we have Sarah Knoll, Sarah just waved, who is the project planner, and Brian Roth, the landscape architect. From Landhack Consultants, the servicing consultant, Steve Pongrans. And I want to start by saying that New Horizon, we have a company philosophy that we call our 100-kilometer philosophy, which is we do business with people who come from within 100 kilometers of our head office as often as we possibly can. And we've done that with trades with suppliers, and in our Made in Hamilton solution was a local 60-year-old architectural firm known as KNY&H. It used to be KNY, and the M&H are here, the new owners who worked there for a number of years. Our senior project manager is Mark Begin. Mark, if you can wave. And the two partners in the firm are Wayne Harrison and the specific presenter today, Shen Mishkowski. Also, Shen is the M in KNY&H. So just by way of very brief context, that is what you just saw as the across the street on Francis development that we did a few years back. 129 unit, 4-story waterfront condominium building and 78 townhouses, 2 to 3 stories in a grouping that front on the Francis. Is a little further east, also on the waterfront, it's 2 6-story buildings and 11 townhomes for a total of 484 units. That was the largest single-phase condominium in the history of the city and the fastest selling condominium in the history of the city, and we're pretty proud of that. Now I'd like to introduce Shem to take you through some of his aspects of this presentation. Shem?
Thank you, Jeff. I'd like to begin first by just highlighting some of the characteristics of the existing site. So the site is proposed as an infill development situated in a precinct that's predominantly residential. It has been undergoing substantial growth, as Jeff alluded to, and this will be a final phase in a developed area always intended for high-density development. The site offers excellent connections to the parks and waterfront trails, the Stoney Creek Business Park, Confederation GO Station, the downtown Hamilton area, and the QW. The existing neighborhood is a mixture of low-rise, mid-rise, and high-rise residential of various types, with some commercial to the west, the number. When we were presented with the opportunity to work on this project and viewing this land and this opportunity, we were very inspired to introduce some modern and contextually sensitive mixed-use landmark within with a unique urban identity. In doing so, we would essentially complete the neighborhood, have enhanced the public realm by creating an accessible and pedestrian-friendly hub, provide public art, develop additional social space and encourage connectivity between the existing trail system and established developments. We provide alternate housing types within the community that will bring commerce and vitality. And finally, introduce intelligent architecture, design, and master planning. We will give it uncovered design freedom and latitude on behalf of Jeff and his team, a very rare opportunity for any architect. And along with this very special piece of property, we saw this as a catalyst to create an iconic and vibrant community. The inspiration is being on the waterfront and the tall ships that sailed Lake Ontario in the past and to do so today from time to time. We investigated several variations of the built form and found that the proposed accomplished the necessary critical mass for placemaking, which seeks to strengthen the connection between people in the urban environment. We accomplish this by strategically placing uses that engage the public and pragmatically enhance the site. We developed a site that harmonizes with this context by carefully considering the built form's interactions with the existing developments and strategic placement of the towers to minimize impact. And to create a landscape and a streetscape that reads as several animated buildings rather than a monolithic urban edge, making it more friendly for pedestrians. And as well, be more architecturally appealing.
So many of you may know that just over 10 years ago, there were no condominium projects being built anywhere in the downtown core of Hamilton. Our firm went out on a limb to say we think that we can do this, and we started 2 projects virtually at the same time. One was the Urban West condos at the corner of Dundurn and Aberdeen, and the second was what is known as City Square. We're currently finishing the 3rd and final phase. It's significant because it shows the growth of this marketplace and the acceptance of this built form within the marketplace as a desired way to live. We've gone from a 33-unit small building to now 500 units in 2 buildings on the waterfront in Stoney Creek with extreme market acceptance and what we would say architecture that we're proud of for generations to come. We moved to Oakville. We did 400 units in the fastest selling single-phase condo in the history of Oakville, and are quite proud of what's left behind there. As mentioned, our Sapphire condos are now just being moved into in the second building at the end of this month, and will be finished off long before the end of this year. Finally, we're just in the midst of launching in Waterdown. If you looked at this picture 5 years ago and said Waterdown, you get a much different response from a marketplace, but we can't keep people from calling us on this project. We have 1,800 units in 8 buildings that will be eventually built on the east end of Dundas Street, just by the two-sided Tim Hortons, for those of you who know the community. And we are about to start construction on the first and second buildings in the next 30 to 120 days. And again, architecture that we've worked with CanYMH on and are quite proud of. Finally, let's talk about what a landmark looks like. In 1974, this is what a landmark looks like. And I think it's time for Hamilton to have a local solution that creates a visual description of what has happened to the rest of our city, which is it's new and modernized and changed.
Okay. These are the guidelines and policies that were considered when developing design, and they provide useful reference in the report as well. Yes, shadows happen. They are natural occurrence for any development. We carefully sited the buildings as to minimize the impact of neighboring properties. Through alignment of the buildings, we can minimize morning shadows, thereby the impact on the adjacent neighborhood as well. Through the day, the shadows become segmented and into thinner columns and track quickly across the site as the sun sets. The placement of the built form on the site further preserves view corridors by situating the podium away from the property line at Francis and Green Road. This is often an atypical strategy for high-density development in urban projects. However, it is far more sensitive in
to the community than having a hard street edge right against the two pedestrian-friendly areas. Furthermore, the pedestrian views have been preserved through deployment of slender built form, terracing, step backs, and appropriate scale along the public right of ways, within the context of creating an appropriate urban identity. Yes, they are tall buildings, as intended. Careful consideration was given to the podium's extent. We stepped back the podium from the property lines in adjacent existing built form to create a sense of openness to encourage walkability and connectivity. This diagram illustrates a section through Variances Avenue where we have kept the podium 5 times the width of the right of way from the nearest low-rise development, which is well in excess of the U-Haul. In terms of the programming of our site, we found this is obviously very paramount to how the public could interact with the building. Here we're encouraging interaction with the public through commercial spaces and open spaces with walk-up apartments along Green Road, and these will be the primary street level spaces for public engagement. This demonstrates the amenity, lobby spaces, and vehicular drop-off areas that will serve the residents and visitors upon arrival. We provide continuity of sidewalks and access to the adjacent park for both residents and the public, which is currently unavailable. Bike access from the development to trails will also be easily accessible. We want to create a sense of slow architecture along Variances and Green Road. Pedestrian entrances, commercial patios, terrace amenities, landscape features, and public art have all been accommodated to create a contextually sensitive and an animated pedestrian compatible streetscape. Massing is split, granulated, and articulated with canopies, projections, and an appealing material palette. We wanted this to be vibrant and engaging to all. This illustrates the activated public space created by commercial spaces, landscape features, such as the compass and the water feature, and the seamless cascading accessible transitions between the development and the public realm. The intent was to create a heterogeneous facade that would undulate as it addresses the site along Variances and Green Road. The juxtaposition of fast architecture along North Service Road has been articulated along the podium using large but familiar architectural elements and colorful materials. The material palette was informed by the colors of the water, sandy beaches, parks, and new development that was incorporated into phase 2 of Sapphire, as Jeff has mentioned. Hues of blue glass, spandrel, and soft natural taupes are used in the towers in absence of charcoal gray. The fenestration facade will create a sense of movement through inspired architectural design. A unique, more modern approach to Hamilton's current landmark tower. While color palettes used for the towers provide a consistent theme, the podium's tactility is further articulated and enhanced with natural wood textures, masonry, and architectural block. The 1.6-acre raised parquet on the podium is an unprecedented architectural feature in this area. It provides numerous amenities with southern exposure while still maintaining connectivity to Green Road and Variances by terracing and stepping back. These spaces bring life and vitality to the active outdoor spaces within this community. The rooftop podium has been designed to be a self-contained outdoor amenity space that properly serves the residents. Features such as the central plaza, gathering areas, pet parks, fitness areas, a running track, children's play area, and even the community garden have all been incorporated into the design. The outdoor amenities are further complemented by significant interior amenity spaces that will support their use year-round. We feel that we've accomplished a development that is holistic in design, that acknowledges the surrounding context, and that will yield a vibrant, dynamic, well-needed, and well-inspired urban landmark, while achieving an urban identity for Stoney Creek and its waterfront.
So in summary, folks, a couple of things we would like you to know about this design. It's intended to be a community that can live on its own, but also interact with its surroundings. There will be a strong sense of livability. There will be using geothermal heating and cooling for all three towers. But as an addition, we're going to geothermal heat the rooftop amenity areas, so it's available 12 months a year for the residents. We also, in our most recent submission, which happened to be in Beamsville, are doing our building there in LEED Gold. We haven't gone through that process on this yet. We're still going through the design phase, but we are those type of builders in a number of ways. We like to make sure that what we do is environmentally appropriate, and we also like to, we have a company philosophy that effectively says, we are building what we're building so that in 50 years our grandchildren are driving by and will probably point to the architecture we leave behind and say, this was built by my grandparents' company. And that's the approach we take to this architecture. So a building of this size, scale, nature, and importance is quite a responsibility, and we take that quite seriously, and we look forward to your questions and feedback to this architectural. Yeah.
Thank you very much. So, opportunity for each panel member to ask a few questions, so we'll start.
Okay, yeah, are you close to a water table underneath that you're going up with your parking rather than all down?
Actually, no, we don't know. The thought of going up was to allow ground floor units to be able to view over the existing 3-story, 2-story towns to have a water view right from the ground level. So that was the thought process for raising the parking.
Okay.
I have no questions.
Yeah, no question.
I think I saw the floor plate of each tower is identical or 950 square inches.
Yes, that's correct.
Going to call.
I have no questions.
Any implications from the QEW and road noise in terms of design and the elevations directly oriented to QEW?
Yes, we've actually, we had a study done, and we've actually provided a 4.5 meter wall along North Service Road that would then help with the noise mitigation issues.
So for the residential units, it looks like from the other elevation, are there open balconies oriented to QEW? Is there amenity space?
Yes, the balconies are, that's correct.
There's no noise
impact.
applications, okay. Bit of experience with condo development. What sort of parking ratio do you find is functionally correct? Zoning bylaws establish a number through marketing. We don't want you to be building parking that's going to sit vacant. So, what's your experience? I guess the prelude question to that is, are you building any smaller units?
So 2 things we wanted to point out, and I'm glad you asked both those questions at once. So the parking ratio we have proposed is in line with the 2 existing phases on the 2 condominium buildings that we have built in this neighborhood, and it's exactly what the market is asking for. So it's
1-to-1.
1-to-1 plus 10% plus 25% visit, which is, we come in about 1.3, Sarah, 1.3. So the second piece, yes, we have some spaces for our commercial as well. There's also lay-by on Green Road proposed for some of the quick convenience in and out commercial, which is pretty important to store owners. From a size perspective, the idea is to meet 2 or 3 slices of the market in a building of this size, starting with the sort of most affordable 505 square foot 1-bedroom unit that our kids seem to be buying, and that people are not leaving on our shelves anywhere in this marketplace right now. We're not really looking for super high-end luxury, but when you get to the point where you're able to see downtown Toronto with your window.
Without question, in order to market the sites, you agree absolutely one per unit is essential?
Oh, for sure, no less. So just for context, we have 0.8 at our city square site, and we voluntarily built 1.1 after trying 0.8 for one building, because of the final 10 units to sell, 9 had no parking. We just don't see that as a reality. But in the context of this development, it may now create the critical mass required for proper public transit to this neighborhood that doesn't exist now. So there's some benefit.
Did you explore with MTO the ability to take either entrances off the service roads or contemplate a service lane that would come in basically parallel with that? Because the site basically has 3 street interfaces. Service road,
Right.
we'll agree, probably not a very
Francis Street,
pedestrian
yeah.
environment,
Sure.
very busy traffic, Green, and then Francis. Francis seems to be 3 streetscapes. Did you look at using that entrance or that flankage along the service road for the operational aspects of the site, whether it's garbage collection, entrances to the parking garage?
We haven't under the assumption that it wasn't available, but we're certainly not averse to it.
I think that MTO is a no.
You said that, not me.
Has any sightline issues with your curvature for your 2 primary entrance points? Any issues with sightlines?
No, we've actually purposely stepped the building back and try to open up that corner, so it does help address that.
Did you consider other forms of development when you put your, like normally the committee gets to see some earlier forms of development where, in this case, I guess where my question's going is position of the towers. I appreciate the outdoor amenity space and the desire to maximize sunlight to encourage the use of those spaces. But had you considered putting the towers closer to the highway and maybe grouping them around in a way that such that you still have an open amenity space to the south, and keep the density away from the housing?
So one of the challenges in this is that it's a phased development for obvious reasons. And so not only do the 3 towers have to be able to be built independently, but the entrances and exits and egress and parking has to be segmentable on a tower by tower basis.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of moving parts. We felt that a southern exposure amenity area would mean, unlike many amenity areas in the buildings we built, they will actually get used. In a lot of cases, the amenity areas just sit empty and get 1% of the use you would have expected when we were designing the building. So we think that with heating it geothermally and keeping it to the south where it's on the sunny side, we'll have a much better take up for the use of that amenity area. To be honest with you, not that everyone except in this moment is honest. So to continue the honesty in which we present, we sort of landed here first and found all the reasons through KNY's work to fall in love with this and didn't really explore, change, do anything. It just, all of the things that we challenged them with an open slate, make the shadows as minimal as they can, make the entrances work, make it 3-phaseable, make it raised podium with public space that can be used, not, it's going to be astroturf, it's going to be geothermally heated, it's going to be green 12 months of the year and usable. All these things seem to come together in a nice way. We put noise protection from the highway for the outdoor amenity space. We are asking for a variance to make the green road interface some residential oriented units, so there's people on the street, so there's activity on the street. So the side of the building doesn't look like the side of the building, it looks like a row of very unique townhomes. So all of those considerations came out.
What drove your desire for the height? Like, how did you assess that you're gonna market that many units in this location? Do you have a market study that supported all this?
Well, we are the market study. So not being a wise guy at all, we sold 484 condominiums in 3 weekends in a restaurant. We didn't open our sales center because, as we found out today, when you put a sales center coming soon, people sleep on snowy nights in front of it to be first in line. So we did a managed 3-weekend release in the Edgewater restaurant and sold 484 units, and as typical, about 15% of them rescinded. And 14 days later, we sold those all over again. If and when the marketing side goes up for this, I just hope we have enough places for people to park. Quite frankly, its response will be phenomenal.
Yeah, because I looked at your ratio, you've got 66% runs roughly once, and 33% twos.
Correct.
And you're deficient in your parking by 400 cars. And in your experience, has a twos drawn more than one parking stall? Has it been a desire for seniors to require 2 parking spaces?
We have the project I showed you in Oakville, 400 units. All of our 2-bedroom units, 50% of them have a second for sale spot available. It's been sold out and lived in for 3 years. We still own 18 of those spots. We can't sell them for half of what they cost us to build. So our experience shows that if you have a 2-bedroom unit with 2 parking spots attached to it, and then a 2-bedroom unit with 1 parking spot attached to it, both people get what they want. A lot of folks in 2-bedroom units are families going in the wrong direction, where you have a single parent or a kid every other week, and 2 bedrooms works. A lot of our more senior purchasers are downsizing into 1 car and 2 bedrooms. So there's a good mix, and the mix works in the marketplace.
How did you handle the visitor parking?
Did we allow a 1.25? We are on our way.
The ratio is 1.5 including visitors,
Right.
and we're asking for the 1.3.
So in our Sapphire project next door, we have 0.25 visitor spots, which is 117 visitor spots for 484 units. Based on our experience, this will be building 17, 18, and 19 by the time we get there. That's overkill. We didn't argue with that, shaking the bushes on that one, but here the ratio will be 0.15, 0.2 visitor spots for every unit, so hundreds of them.
So the desire to position the podium at the heightened position that had to do with to the benefit of the first floor units having water view.
Correct.
But somewhat the scale of the podium is totally out of scale with the neighborhood.
Well,
So I'm wondering why you didn't consider maybe dropping the parking down a level or 2, assuming the water table's not high. And if you didn't break the podium up into forms that are a little bit more inconsistent with forms that better relate to the neighborhood than one continuous block.
so there are 4 sides to the podium. One side is what I would consider the life-supporting noise wall in southern Ontario. One side is designed with residential units and commercial units. One side is the grand entrance of the condominium, which faces the townhomes that we hold close to our hearts because we built them. And while building them, had a great relationship with the folks in the Bayliner.
Yeah, I'm referring to mass and
No,
scale.
I understand.
I'm not
So-
referring to articulation and
Well, but
you know, it's a long wall. You can articulate it to the 9s, but the reality is it's still a long wall. So in most developments, you normally see every 40 meters, some kind of an opening within the block to break the scale of the podium down so it's more in keeping with the neighborhood. Whereas right now you have a long wall, and yes, it's articulated with some projections and so on, but it's not broken in terms of the overall mass of it,
which wall are you referring to?
any of the walls.
I would say, well,
Like if you look at the wall along the highway, for example, okay, how long is that wall? 400? 500?
You talk about the one.
I guess this is about massing and scale.
Talk
So
about the one that faces the North Service Road?
yes,
I think we did at one point look at having units back there, but you're not gonna have anybody, I don't think anybody's gonna wanna be living facing North Service or the QEW. That's the level of articulation that went into that wall, we're hoping to still break that wall up without putting people back there.
Okay, my last question is, 2 service entrances for vehicles for almost 2,800 cars. Apart from the fact they really should go towards the QE and not onto a residential road.
Which we're happy.
But
If we
2
do it,
entrances,
we'll do it.
and getting back to the massing, because when you start to articulate the base and podium, the opening then allows you for another garage opening. Because if you ever lose a door on 2,800 cars, you got 1 garage door servicing 2,800 cars a piece, AM and PP, and so you're looking at a bit of a challenge there, I would think, in terms of operating.
That's a fair comment.
I don't,
You know,
yeah, it's more of a comment than a question. Anyway, that's it. I guess we'll go to comments now from the committee and see what people feel.
We did, just on that point, we did do some research on the Maryland Monroe buildings in Mississauga. And on a per square foot basis, we have fewer square feet per door than they do for their garages. So it may not be a perfect science, but felt like it would have been enough.
But if you've got transit-oriented development opportunity, then, because even so, I don't know what you developed in your first phase that was so successful, but your 500 units tend to go towards transit-oriented development for people who don't own a car. If they don't own a car, then you're using transit. If there's no transit, I'm not sure your philosophy is on that, but.
Well, we actually, in our planned condominium amenities, we intend to run a shuttle bus to and from the GO station in the early hours and late hours. So
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Okay, let's go to comments and we'll start.
Okay, so landscaping, appreciate the efforts made with the design on the podium, but kind of would prefer to see more at the ground level so that you're contributing to the neighborhood and creating parkette space for them. I think more people will speak to that as well. Just as another point, the dog park, or the pet park, it's our experience that about 25% of units have dogs, so that would be about 450 dogs, so it might be a substantial dog park to facilitate those. Yeah.
Thank you.
I guess I will start with a general comment. It's not really to you as the developers and the design team, but it's more to the city, I think. It's contextualized, I think, maybe the comments from all of us is that, this is really a failure of planning, and not speaking specifically to your development, I'll have some comments about that, but clearly there's no secondary plan here, and it's clear that no one had a real idea how this area is meant to develop. You've got a sequence of developments, all of them different from the previous one, that don't come together to create, to me anyway, a kind of real community. And that's just terribly unfortunate. And then several years ago, someone, I'm sure no one in this room, decided you had a site, mixed use, that's fine, but no height, no density limit. So I think, we're not gonna, I think, be in a position to really necessarily try to push your height down, push your density down, given your zoning mix that you have, which is unfortunate, because in my view, these buildings are at least twice the height they should be if you're going to meet the UHOP tests around minimizing shadow impacts, compatibility with surrounding development. This is a suburban area, there's no transit nearby. I appreciate you're gonna be running the shuttle, but this is a suburban area, and your development is a suburban development, and in some respects that's okay, but it's just really out of scale with the area. And I look at the view from across the lake and kind of test it all. You're dominating the skyline, you're dominating the escarpment. It's, in the bigger picture thing, it's really not good planning for urban design. However, you have permissions, and so I think we have to respond to what you've got here and see if we can work with the mass you have, or work with the density of height that you have, and see if we can give more back to the community. Use this development to sort of try to pull these disparate parts together into something that works a little bit better. So that's sort of the context for my comments, and I don't try to be too long with it, but Just generally on massing, I think given the severe shadow impacts on the developments to the north, not only in spring and fall, but in June as well, that pulling the towers back towards the QEW would be appropriate. And that would allow you to put the amenity area where it would be better located, which would be more at the front of the towers or between the towers. It's really, to my mind, the amenity space is a wasted opportunity. It's not going to be well used in that location. The lake is the amenity. I appreciate you need to provide some, but on that side of the building, it's not going to be pleasant. I think even your wind studies demonstrate that it won't be particularly hospitable. So pulling the towers back will have a little bit of benefit in terms of shadow impacts. I think if you're going to go this tall, you need to respect the guidelines, certainly around tower floor plate size, and thin them out even more. They're tall, so they're going to be, have some elegance maybe to them, but making them even more slender would help. And again, help with shadow impacts. The podium, again, I guess we have to live with parking in the structure that makes up most of the podium. The retail piece of that is very minimal. And again, I think this is where, if you're coming forward with this much population and density and scale, that you do need to give more to the community. And whether the community needs it or not, I think that corner really needs more than just a handful of retail units. Maybe it needs a better open space element. I think it needs more retail. The approach on the north side, pick up and drop off areas, is a pretty suburban approach. I don't know, it would be better to have units all along that edge to bring your pick-up, drop-off, servicing, etc., bring it all into the site. And of course, that'll be a challenge with the podium. So I'm not sure how you resolve that, but that frontage is not ideal. The units along Green, is it? I suppose that's one attractive side of the podium. The edge along QEW, no reason to put any active uses on that edge, but the architecture there is just, well, frankly, the architecture of the whole podium is incredibly busy to my mind. I just don't understand why there needs to be so much variety. It's kind of like you're saying, this is the big ugly mass, so we're going to just throw a lot of things on and give it a lot of color and try to hide the fact that it's really out of scale with the neighborhood. The towers themselves, I'm not going to say much about the architecture. The balconies are a dominant element, and you can use balconies to create elegant buildings. You can see some examples of that in the GTA, not as many as we'd like to see, but here the balconies are very dominant. They're extruded. If you could pull them in, recess all or most of the balconies, and just really emphasize the vertical glass elements, that would certainly, I think, go towards creating more of a legacy. I think I'll finish there. Thank you. Thank you, by the way, for the very thorough package. Certainly went over the top in that regard, but I appreciate all the information provided.
I want to commend you on the amount of landscape area. That's great to see. But I do think you're going to have a challenge on the podium. I think your wind study has some really big challenges. So I think when you get into detailed design, you're going to have to really work to address those. If not, it's going to be a very uncomfortable space. I would have liked to have seen a little bit more at grade space and get into breaking up the podium and internal walkway or pedestrian space at grade would be nice. I think the sheer size of the parking area, I don't know what your considerations are for security, but it is going to be a very large space that's going to require some attention as well. I think, again, the drop-offs located along Variances, it would have been nice to see your townhouse form over there to kind of relate to the units across the street. knowing that Green Road is up for, another potential building, what that interface is gonna look like. And to James' earlier comment about MTO, if you could get some drop off located on obviously what's your least desirable side of the property, that would go a long way to improve it, I think. But again, from a landscape perspective, it's always nice to see an ambitious project. I hope that you'll carry it through the detailed design and make sure that it doesn't get watered down. I think I'll leave it there for now.
I'm going to just back up on the screen. Just while we're waiting for that, I'd also like to thank you for the package material. It's very thorough and easy to understand. And I'll try not to repeat some of the things that have been said up until now, but I do agree that it was tough, I think, for myself, I'll speak just for myself, but I think maybe some of the others from the comments that were to kind of wrap our heads around this proposal. Because in some ways, it looks like the original permissions for the site were created in the day when we just slab towers in the park was getting built. And so I don't know when you were looking at this whether that even was a possibility. In other words, to look at a tower in the park kind of model where you're getting no podium-based building, but just towers rather than a slab form or a tall floor building, more of just a landscape open space, because this is more of a suburban area. So when I first looked at this and went through the package, it was kind of scratching my head because if you didn't know the context, the scale of both the podium and the towers would lead you to believe that this was in the center of a urban area, very close to transit, walkable, that sort of thing. So that's the kind of language, that's the kind of posture that this development is putting out to the world. And I appreciate the comment about this for the long run, but you want your grandchildren to be proud of it. And I think that's a wonderful aspiration. And certainly possible. And I'll sort of echo Tim's comments that it's that you have your permission to. There's no height limit. You've got density. So it's really a matter now of what you do with it. And I think the thing that's your most difficult challenge right now is the several levels of above grade parking, which are at the moment all attached. And so you've got this tremendously large base building or podium, which again, as others have commented, it's creating these very long walls. And you can't, there aren't enough uses that you can use to cover all of them. So again, one possibility is did you explore or could you explore actually breaking up that mass? And I think you said you're going to do this in phases, and the phases actually have to operate independently. So I'm not quite sure why the parking garage needs to be one continuous mass. Could you, in fact, shift, let's say,
Which side gives a demand?
the central tower, to the corner, and actually drive a private or public street through the center of the site, creating some sort of public spaces in the middle. The other question I didn't hear, maybe it was in the conclusion, whether the water table is too high to actually drive some of the parking, more of the parking underground, that didn't help deal with that. And then the other comment that I would make, again, when you have your density permissions, your height permissions, I don't see any reason why you need to go beyond what, if you are going to be doing point towers, to go beyond what the Hamilton Town Building Guidelines are recommending in terms of floor plate size. And I think that would also sort of help with the elegance and the silhouette of this from a distance. So yeah, again, I think this would really benefit from the breaking up of the base of the podium. Some grade level public space in the middle of the site. It's a large site. I think we can handle that. Slimming up of the towers, and yeah, you got a simplification. we hear from the city presentation that across the street where the plaza site is, there's another proposed development there. Not sure whether you put the proposed, what they're proposing in, just how, what you're planning to do relates to that. And just echoing the comments about simplifying some of the base building design. And I think if the podium base is reduced to its length and down into some manageable pieces, probably would have to be quite as busy. I'll leave it at that.
Colin?
Okay, thank you. Thank you for a very thorough presentation and package. Appreciate it. And I've heard you say a number of times in your presentation and the package that you're creating landmark buildings. And I agree that this certainly fulfills that criteria. The landmark building will be visible from many, many different places across the region. But I don't see it delivering yet a landmark public realm, or what you're giving back to the community. Most of the comment that I heard during the presentations were amenities geared towards the residents, but not necessarily about what you're giving back to the community. Building on some of the comments that some of my colleagues have given, that we're essentially building out to the property lines with a few notches out along Variances Avenue, but I see a real opportunity on a site of this size and magnitude to relocate some of those private amenities onto the ground floor so they can be used, or onto the site level or the street level so they can be used by the surrounding community. I have real concerns about the amenity terrace. I appreciate that you're going to the extent of using geothermal heat to try and augment some of or extend the seasons, but your wind study shows that it's going to be really difficult to use that space in the shoulder seasons in particular. It's also worth noting that there's a kind of gender bias baked into wind studies, that they are used the average kind of 1.8 meter male as their study. So that means that we're on the marginal zone for that kind of average male. So if you think of women and children, it actually it creates a more significant concern from the wind study perspective. So I think it's worth zooming in on the usability of that space relative to wind. I also see, building on the kind of public realm line of thinking, I see a lot of conflict, particularly on Variances Avenue, with pedestrians and vehicles. Given that there's thousands of vehicles coming in and out of here on a daily basis, with 4 curb cuts, there is going to be a lot of conflict with people moving around on bicycles and walking in that area, for residents or people who live in the neighborhood who are trying to access the multi-use trail, the waterfront lands, primarily to the east. So you should consolidate your driveway entrances. I think, building on what Robert said, the idea of having some kind of central courtyard feature that can then have vehicular entrances off of it. You could really consolidate this down to one entrance for pickup and drop off, and a second service entrance off of Green Road or off of the North Service Road, which completely removes all of that conflict. Right now, having 4 curb cuts is really just unacceptable for this significant development and the number of vehicles that will be using it on a daily basis. I also think the relationship to the parklands or the natural woodlots to the east could be improved. Right now, we just have essentially blank podium wall relationship to those lands. So that could be improved. I think that's an opportunity to relocate some of that amenity space adjacent to that woodlot. I think that's a missed opportunity of the site now, because that is what we heard from the planner, that those lines are not going to change. And then you had mentioned, thank you for mentioning your sustainability targets. I would really encourage you to target LEED Gold if you can. I know that there's significant economics behind it, but it's the right thing to do. When you're speaking about the legacy for your grandchildren, that is the most important legacy for your grandchildren. Finally, building on the idea of sustainability and change over time, think about what happens to all that parking space when, in our lifetimes, we move away from single-family vehicle ownership. How can that space be repurposed into something that we maybe can't imagine today, but will happen within our lifetimes? And again, this is some kind of legacy question in a suburban development like this, where parking is a very significant amount of the floor area that you're building. What happens to it when we don't own vehicles anymore? That's it for me.
You know how great of a road hockey tournament would be?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so, my comments going back to the questions posed by the city, I think you have a big, problem with scale. The moment you were married to, 1 mega, podium, you kind of, from the design perspective, you tie yourself to one possible solution. You have such a big site that you potentially have an internal, either public or private road that actually allows you to create quadrants, very distinctive quadrants that can develop in time. And that also will allow you to, you speak a lot to slow architecture and giving back to the community and actually building it on what you already built to the north of the site instinctually. And because you had a different build form to the north, you had a street and block pattern catered to that build form. There is no reason why a tower couldn't also have a street and block pattern that will bring all your amenities to the ground and really build on what you already are starting to form a legacy. Otherwise, you implemented a legacy on the north side and suddenly you're turning you back to it by building this fortress. So I think by introducing a public or private road system that allows you to centralize all vehicular access, bring down your amenity spaces, and also reduce your footprint for all your towers, you will start finding that scale. The other thing, once you explore that design shift, which doesn't mean that your yield will be thrown off balance or whatever, you will also kind of explore whether your retail makes sense where you're locating it, or maybe shifts a little bit, I guess, south to maybe kind of mirror what the new development across the street is doing, and you can build that relationship and maybe build more of a retail kind of little thing there. In a nutshell, I think the moment if you open the opportunity to rethink this whole podium idea and really introduce more of a segmented development blocks that are divided by an internal road system, your solutions will start to kind of come down to the ground and make sense. Thank you.
Oh, I'll try not to sound repetitive, it's very tough after all those comments. And it's a great design on a challenging site. But what I see in the design is there's a real issue in trying to accommodate the parking and the amount of residential development in terms of scale and intensity. And the outcome is the podium. As you heard, and I agree with the comments, that the podium seems to be out of balance or out of character with the neighborhood. The project needs to be designed functionally for the residents of the building, but also needs to be designed for the benefit of the neighborhood. So, I understand the design challenge. You need to provide parking supply. You not go so deep. I would really like to see some attempts to try to reduce the amount of scale of that with the fundamental objective of this, which is to try to increase the amount of sort of active uses at the lower levels. Because if you look at the site plan, proportionally in terms of the periphery of the site, there's very little of the site that's actually dedicated to the active uses. Unfortunately, to meet the requirements, it's more weighted towards the podium, which is parking. Admittedly, you put a great face on it, but it's not active space. So my emphasis here is please look at the opportunities to see if there is ways to try to increase and improve that at-grade relationship. So whether it's more units as you've done on the Green Road side, which it's great as an alternative housing unit within a project. You can offer various unit types. If you could do more of that perhaps on Variances, that would have the benefit of activating that streetscape. We've been to that group parking for those units, so they're in keeping with the former character of what's there. And that would also help with that height transition, because as it stands, all the buildings are pushed to the north, so that grade height transition is pretty abrupt. So if there's a way to potentially look at maybe shifting some of those back slightly, bringing that amenity space, instead of being between the buildings and the QEW, maybe some amenity space between the buildings and the waterfront, and some articulation and more active uses along that streetscape. That's what I see as the opportunity, really where this development is going to knit into the fabric of the neighborhoods along that Francis front.
Robert, take the chair. I agree with all the comments. I think your density's driven your parking has driven your podium, and your podium's driven the lack of scale. I think, and I can't speak to the market. Taking that aside, because I hate to see one tower go up and then the market disappears, and you got this single tower sitting out there with some kind of a podium wrapped around some single tower to suit the parking required for the first tower, and then the rest of the site looks like whatever. I mean, that's a long-term or mid-term consideration. I think if you did consider an urban street internally with some low-rise housing built into a podium of a tower, that would be somewhat more in relationship as a transition from the development that you successfully completed on the north of the site. It would then tie it in that there is a bit of an urban street experience, because you can speak a lot about, I noted it because I found it, I was trying to make your comments and then I looked for how you have actually accomplished it. And you use the term pedestrian-friendly hub. So hub suggests to me there's a community access to your podium, or a community access to your development in some fashion. And there are no public stairs up to the podium, there is no open public. And I understand we do a lot of developments as well, security concerns and things like that. However, given the yield that you're establishing on this development, because of the unlimited height, I don't see that you're giving anything back. It's totally an inward focus. I'm really not sure how well that podium is going to function, or what use it will actually get in our climate. But having said that, you're a couple of months better than Ottawa. But where we come from, when we look at our podium design, we really question it significantly, because we just don't get the use that we would like to get. You know, if you look outside today, but people can see that you're lucky to get 4 months or 5 months out of the podium on a good day. I mean, the heat of the beginning of August or July, podiums aren't even used when it's that hot. So this focus on the podium as a solution for your amenity and an outdoor space component over a 4-story garage is, like, the whole thing's been driven by the density. And I think if you go back to the density and we talk about smaller floor plates, typically we've been doing 850 square meter towers, plates, 8 units of floor, 10 units of floor. You're up to 12. That's a large. I looked at your plate. It's a large plate, particularly when you take it up 59 floors. And the overshadowing and everything else is all, again, all tied together in terms of, does this fit? We talk about fit. Now, you got an open site. You're open in the suburbs. What fits? You take a look at what's developed so far. Of course, that had its economic model that drove it at the time. And now the economic model is starting to change. Densification's coming. Okay, but what is reasonable? What is reasonable? What is a best practice on a site like this? What would you think you can? Yeah, you had 3 weeks. You sold out the units, and you got this. You're feeling like it's going to go. Can it go to 59 floors? Can you get that kind of traction? And what is your alternate solution to that? But so to me, this is a simple solution to a high density site, taking advantage of height. It's not necessarily a responsible solution. I think looking at the site in another way may actually help you out in a lot of ways as well, particularly from absorption and what to do, what if, and relate better to the neighborhood. Because I think you really have to integrate the neighborhood somehow into this development. And
Can I just ask you to expand on that? Because I've heard a number of people talk about incorporating the neighborhood into it, and I would love to know what you mean by that.
okay, well, we're not to give you a solution here.
No,
We're
I
just give you
want to make sure I
comments. But
understand
if you
what you're
ask
talking
me,
about.
if you ask me in a roundabout way, without giving you a solution, I'm trenching over that line right now. But if you looked at, because of the scale of the site, you could have easily generated a couple of streets. You could have easily taken the tower, created a base, created a street front, introduced a little bit of ground floor retail, had a more pedestrian experience, just like what we're doing in retail now. You saw the retail sites are getting, even the big boxes falling off now, and we're going back to more street-oriented blocks within retail plaza development. That you could have treated that site from that perspective. And I can safely say this because I just went through a whole exercise. I was on a site similar to this where we came up with that solution with the planning department support and direction and support from the urban design review panel. So we came up with what I think is a far better solution to integrate with the community in a better way. Because given that you had no height limit, you just came out and said, okay, let's go for it. Let's jam in the parking and let's come up with some kind of an urban space solution up on top, open space, something that's totally focused to the towers. There's nothing focused towards the community. Community can't walk through there. There's no access. And yet you've taken up a full base and just plunked it down. There's nothing like this anywhere near there. There isn't, you are creating a legacy, as you say, but are you creating one that better relates from a community development perspective? Or just a large urban development? That's all I have to say. Appreciate it. Well, we do appreciate the work you've done. We do appreciate the quality of your presentation, and but the panel has some issues with this solution.
Might be a little bit out of order, but I think try to be helpful because the summary for us to deal with words and to pick up a lot of the comments. Maybe it is a bit much to ask for, 2 streets, but it's simply taking Robert's suggestion to break up the podium, the parking decks into 2 pieces and just bringing a street in here somewhere and out to Princess, lining it perhaps at grade with townhouse units, but parking above. Then you could suddenly, these spaces here suddenly become just real green space, whether they're used by the public or not, at least adding some visual amenity to the neighborhood. Still have plenty of space, I think. Obviously, do you have to go higher with the podium? I don't know. If you push some of the parking down, obviously that would be an ideal solution. But if you do that, pull this tower back would be my preference, certainly. Obviously, you want views, so where it goes, I'm not sure. But to open up this part of the site, bring the street through, suddenly you can get more amenity where the public's going to appreciate it. So I don't know if these are big changes, but given what you're doing in terms of the scale of this development, the impact it's going to have, I think there's just, as everyone's been saying, more that can be done at that ground level to contribute more to the neighborhood. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.